من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Assalamu alaikum to everyone who is joining us today for our iSyllabus Live with Sheikh Ridwan. I couldn't imagine you doing anything better on a Wednesday evening. We're going to forget the Champions League matches on tonight between City and Madrid, because this course is more important than that, and we're going to be exploring with Sheikh Ridwan about his new course that is coming, The Prophetic Art of Persuasion. As you all know, in the last year or so, Sheikh Ridwan has been releasing more short courses, which are, I believe, very pertinent and very connected with our modern world and our kind of modern lives that we're living today. And I believe this is a very important topic that the Sheikh is releasing. So I am super excited, inshallah, to explore it with the Sheikh, how it came about, why he feels is important, relating it to some of the current debates that we're actually seeing, and then to share and also ask some of your questions that you have shared with us. So, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Sheikh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Ahlan wa sahlan and welcome. Yep, this is me.
Jazakallah.
And yeah, you're persuading me to converse with you today. That fantastic background you have. So this is straight out of Africa.
Is that part of the art? It's the art of persuasion, right? It's the art.
Yeah, it's definitely art. I don't know if it's persuading me, but it's definitely art of a type.
Alhamdulillah. Sheikh, how are you? Everything
Alhamdulillah,
well?
very well. As you know, it's been an exciting week here in Turkey with the election taking place. So there's been a lot of commotion, a lot of communication, a lot of persuasion going on. In fact, yeah, this last week I did a trailer for the course, and I was actually lost for ideas, and then I was walking about, and it was pretty clear walking about where I'm staying with all these political parties. I think over 20 political parties, all vying for my attention, everybody's attention, messaging and you know, posters and images, and it was pretty obvious that persuading people one way or the other is extremely important, and it has a lot of real world consequences. So it has a big impact. So that election that took place on Sunday, I kind of mentioned in the trailer that President Erdogan was trailing, according to some opinion polls, by 20 points. So the opposition leader was projected to get up to 60%. And obviously that's a landslide victory in some way. And what ended up happening is that Erdogan just missed an outright majority against all the projections. And it was all based upon the fact that he was able to persuade and to communicate his ideas very clearly to the Turkish people, basically speaking above and beyond politicians and going for big ideas, speaking to their hearts, speaking to their minds, speaking to their convictions, speaking to their sense of their own nationhood. So that's persuasion in action, has real world consequences. That's like way up. That's like beyond everyone's pay grade. Most people won't see the practical impact of the art of persuasion changing, the destiny of our country, because this was considered to be the most important elections in the history of the Turkish nation. So from its foundation in 1924 all the way till now, it was considered the most pivotal election. And how was it won? It was won on the art of persuasion. So it shows you, if it's so important, it's going to have so many consequences. It shows that knowing what this is really important for everybody. I think if you're watching, going through social media, that is all about the art of persuasion. Any advertising campaign you see is about the art of persuasion. Anything that's memorable to you in terms of popular culture is the art of persuasion. Music, art, everything in some way is persuading you to do something. And you can if you think about it, that's big bucks, as they say, and one of the things that, when I was looking to do this course, one of the things that really kind of caught my eye was advertisers know how to persuade, because at the end of the day, they make money out of it. And if it doesn't work, they don't get paid. So there was lots of, it was an interesting time to do a course like this. I think it's definitely something that I've had an interest in for a long time, but it's just come about at this time.
Sheikh, you mentioned the Turkish elections, and I think I would say this, that a lot of Muslims globally actually had their eyes glued onto the screen. There was a general interest because, like you said, it was so pivotal in ways it was going to go. And my first question, I guess, would be that, Erdogan's been in power for a long time, so you would think it's quite difficult for him to defend his positions because he's been there, and people are going to question his policies. But he still was able to persuade. So, what are the few things that you noticed that was really slick from the campaign?
So I think people that are watching from outside, they're saying Erdogan's been in power for a long time. He's going to win again. And it's like, it's a foregone conclusion. It wasn't. Last night, late last night, I watched something which, just when I was about to go to sleep, I was thinking, there was something bugging me, and I thought, that's what it is. I need to follow this. There's a social media influencer who's pro-opposition, very pro-opposition. He goes into the streets for the last 3 years with a microphone, asking people who you're going to vote for, and then he debates with them. Basically, all of his output on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook, was there to persuade the Turkish population that everybody hates Erdogan, based upon the price of meat, onions, everything. He would bring up anything, the price of bread, anything he would do, foreigners, Syrians, all the rest of it. And over that time, he had massive impact because he's very eloquent. He's a graduate with an economics degree, and is very, 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 very eloquent in his speech. And he's called Sadef Vatandash. So basically it means just a simple citizen. That's his name. And it was like, from the street, we're talking to people. And last night after the election, obviously Erdogan had this amazing, turned everything round. He was being interviewed after a day of silence. And he was like, obviously had no sleep. He looked slightly drunk as well. Okay. And he was saying, how did this happen? Then he went through everything, the crisis, in terms of the housing crisis or whatever, for his perspective, the dollar's rate and the price of bread, for example, the fact that Erdogan's been in power for 20 years and, something that's old doesn't feel that enticing anymore. You want to try something new. It's obvious. Everybody kind of thinks, it's like a midlife crisis. You think, well, there must be something better on the other side. Despite all of that, everything in place for him to lose badly, Erdogan losing badly, how did he manage to turn it around? It was very clear. I think what happened is, and the earthquake, never forget the earthquake, which the opposition, milked for every single point. And what Erdogan did is, as soon as the earthquake took place, he had already announced the election. He re-strategized his communications policy. It was all about building, and it was all about telling people, this is what we have done. In other words, I'm not somebody, and this comes at art of persuasion. One of the cores that Aristotle talks about is this idea of ethos, the fact that you trust somebody on the back of their character. He basically said, for the last 20 years, you've known me, this is what I have done. And he just went and enumerated every single thing he'd done. And for the last 2 months, all he's been doing is showing everything he has done recently, launching all these amazing projects, one after the other, and basically saying the other person is the same person that promised you nothing in the past, delivered nothing in the past, and also has been openly lying about what he believed in the past as well. He was openly against women wearing headscarves, banning them from universities. He was all these things, and all of a sudden he's changed his clothing like a wolf in sheep's clothing. And he basically made this contrast between himself, this is what I've done, it's all in front of you, I don't have to say anything else. On the other hand, you have this person who says a lot, but it's not going to deliver. And he just pushed that and continued to push that. And that was it, very clear messaging. And it just ended up getting through to people. And that is given the economic situation, given the earthquakes, you would imagine it was I would say like 60% wouldn't be an understatement if the opposition got that. I was not shocked, but I was shocked because most people that I know who are Turkish, who are kind of pro-Erdogan, didn't expect him to win at all, expected him to be badly defeated. And it's a masterclass, I would say, a masterclass in persuading the population, because he went straight for another thing which is important in persuasion, which is emotion. He pushed this idea of the nationhood of the Turkish people, the fact that the country is under attack externally. It has, all these terrorist organizations undermining its kind of will to exist. Foreign policy, American government, Europe as well. I mean, they really milk this idea that Europe was out to get the Turkish people and Erdogan specifically, constantly siding with the opposition and so on and so forth. So I think it was very interesting how he managed to, on one hand, present his case, and the other hand, undermine the case of the other person. And he did it very cleverly. I mean, it was really clever, because the social media, if you look at it, all the kind of short clips that are clickbait and all the rest of it, very pro opposition. And I thought that's like impossible to counter, but he did it. Mashallah, he did it. And it shows that you can turn things around if you have access to well-known strategies. It's actually the whole thing is strategies, isn't it? He could have just sat there and said, okay, guys, let's what we're going to do, vote for us, kiss babies. And, no, he didn't. He said, look, stay to the message. The message was 2 to 3 things. Stay on point, stay on the message. And it's the same thing if you're dealing with your child who's not eating their vegetables. It's the same thing if you're dealing with, I was speaking to somebody today, actually, in a work situation, a work colleague who's not pulling their weight. And you have to, in some way, negotiate that by keeping them on board, for example. You have to negotiate that if you are faced with somebody who really hates you, and you have to navigate them and continue being amicable with them, persuading them to see another perspective. It doesn't matter what aspect you look at. Human beings, in Arabic, insan, one of the roots is inas, which is to have this, uns, which is to have this kind of sociability, this kind of sense of social connection. And the fact that we have social connection means at some point you're going to have to persuade somebody to do something that they don't want to do, or persuade them to do something that is good for them, but they don't know it. Do you understand? So it's not coercion, and it's not indoctrination. It's persuasion. And even knowing when to persuade somebody and when not to is actually really kind of, I think, pretty important as well. When do you decide it's not your place to persuade somebody? Let them grow themselves.
So moving on from that, Sheikh, I mean, the course is really, part of the course and the structure is to really go back to the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you just mentioned a point there. How do you persuade someone about something that they think is good for you? So we've just looked at the kind of some of the modern issues and the art of persuasion. Is there anything in the seerah that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to persuade people? And how do you link that back to the seerah? It's quite interesting for some people. Like, some people may think persuasion is very modern and new with marketing strategies and modern kind of democratic systems and parties. But can you trace it back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, number one? And then number two, could you, what were some of those tactics that the Prophet ﷺ used and what you came across?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. I've had this idea in my mind, persuasion, because the reason why this has played in my mind is when I was at school, I was really bad at school. Like, my kids know how bad I was because I've hidden my initial O grade results. So I was pretty bad. And the thing that got me even interested in even having to read something was a teacher, as a chemistry teacher, who actually insisted that everybody takes part in the class. Like, everybody has to be attentive. Everybody is going to be part of the conversation. And there was another teacher, a geography teacher, who was very, very much similar. And he wouldn't let you just be this person that was mocking people at the back of the class or getting into fights and stuff. So he put the time in to kind of get me interested. And I ended up end of that year winning a prize for coming top in geography from being like somebody who's not going to sit the exam. And at that point, it was quite interesting because a teacher can have an amazing impact. And there must, and I didn't think at that time, what was it that they did? But looking back now, it was pretty clear what they did. There was certain strategies, certain tactics, certain techniques that they used. And when I started to, get interested in Islam, and then I had teachers, had formal teachers in Islamic studies, and I, alhamdulillah, I've had over, I think 77 teachers looking at their styles of speaking. Some of them, I've got a couple of days ago, I was looking through all my old kind of documents and stuff. I found this fax that I was asked to send by Sheikh Abdul Qadir Sufi. I was with him in 1992, I think it was. He asked me to send a fax to the head of the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Conference. It was a fax. Okay. And in the fax, it was a sentence. And it was during the Bosnian conflict. And he said, to Your Eminence, or something like, to Your Eminence, we need to act now. Use your influence. Let's act together. Contact me. That's all it was. It was like, it was basically like, I was thinking, and if it was me, he told me, look, draft a fax. A fax, I don't know if people know what fax is. It's not good. And those days you had a telephone and you had a fax machine and you had this kind of piece of paper. And it was basically a whole A4 page with nothing on it apart from this sentence. And it was basically in bold. He put it in bold. And I realized that is the power of persuasion because, it's like the story of the Prophet Musa alayhi salatu wasalam in Sahih Bukhari, in which he goes bathing and it's a whole issue in the story, even though it's in Bukhari, but he goes swimming and a stone steals his, comes and takes away his clothing and disappears, and he's looking for it everywhere. And how does he express? He just says Thawbi Hajar. He uses Thawbi Hajar, which means my clothes, stone, my clothes. Stone. In other words, at that point, he had to express something in such a succinct way that he broke every single law of language. But that's the need of persuasion. He had to persuade people to get the stone, to give him his. He could have said, look, guys, there's this, you will never believe this, but this is actually what happened. I was having a bath and then there was a stone and I don't know how he did it, but he took it and then he's gone away with my clothes. So please could you get them back? He had no time. He had to say Thawbi Hajar. And so the thing about the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam was that, and this is what I know, when I was talking about teachers, is I started to check all the teachers that I had and the ones that were very, very successful, and what were the techniques they got to persuade and communicate their message to students and convey, even in a not in a class setting, even like a life setting. How would they influence? How would they gain the confidence of their students? And then obviously I've been teaching for about 14, 15 years. A majority of those 11 years, live classes. I mean, I must be 1,000 live classes I've done. After every class, I would sit back and think, okay, how did that class go? And very rarely did I feel that, because I'd got into the mind of teaching, very rarely was I in a situation where I said, okay, that was a bad class. Because I was constantly, even while I was teaching, there was a constant review of how it was going, because I would look at the students and see if they're engaged or not. So I come to this having reviewed all these teachers that I've had, these great teachers I've had, and my own experience of teaching and my own experience of communicating in whatever way it is, in sometimes difficult situations, you got a very good grasp of counseling skills now. And you'll know that in those kind of situations, how do you engage with a couple, for example, having a relationship dispute? At what point do you speak and what point do you don't speak? How do you listen to that as well? How do you just be silent? Is a whole skill to that as well. And when you look at that, when I looked at all this, and then I looked at the Prophet ﷺ, and especially this hit me when I taught the Seerah a couple of years ago. The Prophet ﷺ's life is just what happens is that when I read anything from the Quran or Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, I never read it in the same way than after looking at this idea of persuasion and communication. How did the Prophet do things? How did he teach? How did he change people? How did he advise people? How did he create this amazing change in a society? And it was almost like poetry in motion. It was almost as if he didn't do it, because you never saw it being done until you look back. You know, like I'll give you a quick kind of example, which is not, you know, in Arabic they do say ولا يصح في المثل الصحة. Like imagine a comedian, not comedian, who's it? A magician.
Yeah.
My other favorite type of people. Imagine they do a sleight of hand. You know, they kind of do that and they go, whoo. They kind of do this. Now, if you kind of slowed that down to 100 times its speed, you would see what they've done. Like you would see, oh, there's a handkerchief and they did that. So when the Prophet used to, so the point is, it happened so fast you didn't notice it. When the Prophet used to do something, you would see it happen. You would never pick up on how he did it until you start to think about it. Like, you know, famous instances that we just pass over, you know, in the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, we think, oh, it's, you know, something that is, you know, nothing happened. But, you know, Suhail ibn Amr, for example, in the story of Hudaybiyah, he's negotiating with the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ is being very soft with him. He's being, despite this harshness and mockery of the Quraysh, the Prophet is continuing something. He's starting a conversation with him with his softness, which becomes clear when he does his tawbah during the conquest of Mecca al-Mukarramah. And then it becomes even clearer during the Battle of Ridda, when everybody's leaving Islam. This, like during the Khilafah of Sayyidina Abu Bakr, the person that steps in Mecca is Suhail ibn Amr. Now, the interesting thing is, from that engagement with his enemy in a tent, negotiating what for the companions was a defeat, and the Prophet being soft at that point, we didn't know. If you didn't see what was happening and how the Prophet was being soft to Suhail ibn Amr, you wouldn't know that softness then led to him thinking, I need to come back to this person, do tawbah, and accept him as the Prophet. If you didn't understand that, you wouldn't know why he, in a sense, changed history by being the person that stood up in Mecca and challenged the people that wanted to leave Islam. How did that happen? It was like the sight of the Prophet, that softness, that if you blinked, you wouldn't see it. And in fact, I guarantee people, when they read the seerah, they will not see that. They will just see these people and the sword, and they have all the famous things that they kind of think about, but never the depth of the Prophet ﷺ. And I think that's the thing. Every single point when I look at the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, what you do see is that same sleight of hand. It's like that kind of poetry in motion, where you don't see it unless you actually pay attention. Like, so why did he put his hand on the shoulder of that person? Why did he put his hand on the heart of that person? You know, why did he, sallallahu, do all these things that are negligible to us, but essentially for a person who's looking for, you know, this is why the course is interesting, because it is trying to take you back and retrace your tracks to the point that you can now see, oh, that's how it happened. You know, that's how. Another example of Nu'aym during the Battle of Khandaq, like he met Nu'aym, one of the chieftains of Thaqif, one of the tribes just outside Thaqif, in passing, and he was just cordial to him. He left this softness in the heart of Nu'aym, and during the Battle of Khandaq, Nu'aym entered Islam when he saw, oh, I need to pick a side. And he was the person that went to Bani Qurayza and started to inform them of the Quraysh and the Quraysh about Qurayza, and he started to unpack their pact. And where did that come from? It came from the fact the Prophet met him in passing, and he wasn't a Muslim, and just gave him this assurance, this kind of softness of his character that ended up persuading him. Now, how does that work? That works when you've got somebody that you probably consider to be your enemy, but you show this softness. You know, what happens is that will come back, and it's like a credit you've got. So persuasion is of different types. It's not just going straight in and telling somebody this is what you need to do, and this is how you structure your argument or whatever. There's, you know, Aristotle talks about the ethos, which is the character of the person, is actually the most important thing. if you don't walk the walk, if you don't carry yourself as a person who's truthful, there's no persuasion, there's coercion, and there's the demagoguery, which is all the rage now amongst even Muslims now, because you just shout somebody down, or you call them out, or whatever it is. Character is extremely important, and if you have no character, then essentially you could convince somebody, you could coerce somebody, but you can't persuade them. You have no power. And then you have things like the ethos and the pathos, which is the kind of emotional aspect of getting somebody to do something, which is a big part of religious discourse as well. Like if you're trying to convince somebody, the worst thing to do is to provide them with statistics and logical arguments. What you do is you just get them, it's like khutbahs. A good khutbah is one where you're sweating and you come out thinking that was a good curry. Do you understand? Like, well, I remember my dad used to say, like, good khutbah is one when you come out and you say mazag, I really enjoyed that. Meaning, you might not know what happened, but essentially it was a good knees up. But the point is, there is a purpose to having emotion and appealing to people's feelings, because most people do react to feelings. In fact, majority of people, I think there's a study done on TED Talks, the 500 top TED Talks. TED Talks, these kind of 17, 18-minute talks about different issues about, science and things. And they found that I think 60-70% of the best ones were based around emotive stories. It was pulled people into the story, and that got them connected. And essentially, that's how that's how Erdogan also won the election, is that he got people to buy into the fact that there's a motherland, and we need to protect it from external forces, from the West, and its attempt to bring in IMF loans and all the rest of it, and the fact that the opposition is about to sell Turkey to the West and America. It was emotional. It was the flag flying. And in fact, one of the most amazing adverts they had in this campaign, it was 2 days before the election. And it was amazing. If you ever get to see it, it's amazing. Basically what it is there's this massive Turkish flag. In Turkey, they have these flags and they're massive.
Yeah.
And what was happening is all of a sudden it was falling. And then this kind of shadows coming down over the whole of Turkey, and people are looking, there's a shadow, and it's like it's being cut. And you see this person cutting the rope. And all of a sudden, everybody from all parts of Turkey start to move and run. And then all of a sudden, they come to this flagpole, which is massive. And obviously, they can't stop it falling. And then they start to, like ants, collect around something. They start to climb on top of each other. And this young man gets to the top and catches the rope and pulls it and jumps off. And he raises the flag again. But the thing is, that's that's a 2 or 3% swing. If you watch that, doesn't matter what party you follow, that's a 2 or 3% swing in the election for wavering voters. And that's it. It's emotive. And that's why, if you're like a khatib or you're an imam, your eye is on this pathos, this idea of emotion. You have to get your congregation to feel that they need to do some kind of change, because it's the thing, that you've got 10, 15 minutes in Jumu'ah, and you want people to buy in to what you have. And in fact, even there's kind of research done on why that is, because what they say is when you tie into something that's emotive, your body releases oxytocin, which is like a hormone which creates a sense of happiness, trust. And all of a sudden, it doesn't matter if what you're saying is illogical or it's even against your interests, you can accept it. Like I can imagine that advert or that political broadcast being watched by almost anyone who's Turkish, and they would just say, "Oh, I'm going to vote for that party. It's Erdogan. It doesn't matter. I'll vote for them because that was amazing. That's what we believe in." That is the power of persuasion, and it's one of these things that there's so many facets to it. And the thing I'm trying to do, I mean, I think with this course, I did kind of say before we came on, I think I bit off more than I can chew, because that fascination that I've had for this topic for the last, since I was like 16 in school, with these really good teachers, a couple of really good teachers that can turn around, for me, the whole idea of learning and education, all the way through all these teachers that I've been in contact with. And then all this, 15 or so years of teaching day in, day out, and seeing what works, what doesn't work. And then constantly thinking about how the Prophet did it. That's like coming together. And there's so many ideas that I'm kind of a bit nervous, because I was talking to my daughter. I picked her up from an art class, and I was saying, oh, it's too much content work. I was looking for advice from her, from a 13-year-old, because it's just so much. It's an exciting topic. It's an exciting topic because you can see it in the way that it changes people's behavior. That's the thing. And I'll tell you one thing. I was at Sultan Ayub al-Ansari radiallahu anhu, the companion of the Prophet, at his resting place in here, and on Saturday actually, and we went for Asr. My son was next to me. He's like 6, 7 now, and I'd bought him a sword. So this kind of wooden sword, and he, as you do, you put your sword in front of you and you're praying. And so it was really funny because he's playing next to me, and then as soon as we say Allahu Akbar for the first rak'ah, this child comes past who's got a sweet, and he was right in front of Sinan, and he's looking up at him. He looks at the sword, he drops his sweet, picks up the sword, walks away. And obviously I'm expecting, a year ago, I would expect my son to kind of run after him or do something.
Yeah.
He didn't move. And then finished the 4 rak'at, he's sitting there, and I would expect him to look at me and say, Dad, he stole my sword or something. He didn't say anything.
Right. Okay.
And then we did the prayers, the du'as and all the rest of it, and nothing happened. Then all of a sudden this kid came up in this, a different kid came up with this Hulk costume with the sword saying, is this yours? And he didn't even blink. He just said, yeah. And he put it down, and that was it. And then he looked at me, and I looked at him, and I thought, yeah, you've passed. Because the whole thing is, there's a time and place for everything. Like I've taught him so many times, the time and place, if you're doing prayer, this is what you do. And that was his practical test. But you have to persuade him to do that. You have to kind of get through, and it has to be through what is essentially your own conduct. Because if I'm in prayer, doesn't matter what's happening, he will not approach me in prayer. And then he must be thinking, oh, something's happened to me. And I'm not going to do anything while I'm in prayer. And how did that happen? It didn't happen just miraculously. It happened through my own process of when I'm in prayer. Part of my thinking is that if I show him that there's any kind of interaction with him in the prayer, he's going to say, well, you can do that in the prayer.
Yeah.
And that sense of, stability and uprightness in the prayer is really, really important. And so that's through example. That's not through, that's just to constant example of the same thing reiterated over, a number of years. And so it affects everything. I think that's the thing. If you're a parent, if you're in your work situation, it doesn't really matter. The fact that you're human means you need it. I think it's as simple as that, because, you're dealing with couples and counseling and all the rest of it. Communication with other people is really important, and persuading them to see your side is important. So there are ways that we need to kind of look at the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, look at the life of the Prophet ﷺ. And I think my initial idea was to have about 40 examples of this, or kind of rules of thumb, or kind of life lessons. Initially I also had this idea. Sheikh Abu Fattah Baghudda has got an amazing book on the Prophet ﷺ as a teacher, and part of it is based on that book, because the Prophet had techniques in teaching that he used to use, which are really interesting. But I thought it's worth expanding it to persuasion in general, just a wider thing, because persuasion is not just about teaching. The Prophet was more vast than being just a teacher, because even his teaching was a communication. It was like a persuasion. It was like a whole masterclass of change. And inshallah, this could be an interesting one.
Just building on that, I was reading a certain incident from the Seerah actually today, just after Badr, where the Prophet's son-in-law has been taken captive, and the Prophet ﷺ then sees the jewelry of Khatija that Sayyidah Ruqayya gave Abu al-As, and then so that example, and the second one when some of the Muslims take his caravan away from them, his belongings, that this caravan that he has, and in both instances you see the Prophet ﷺ saying to the people, is it okay to give his stuff back, or is it okay to release him? And I found that deeply, when you read.
See, the thing, look, Hassan, I mean, the thing about this, when I teach Seerah, I have to totally detach myself from what I'm reading or teaching. Otherwise, I'll be a wreck. And so with this kind of stuff, I actually, if I teach this stuff, I kind of do it as if I'm not teaching it. I'm kind of external to it because it's too powerful. Like what you just mentioned, that's thing when the Prophet is asking permission. Like, why should he ask permission? He's the Prophet of Allah.
Yeah.
And what has he given them? What has he not given them that he should ask? And so this is it. I mean, that's the thing. You read it now. You read it from a different lens. It's actually you're stopped in your track. And this is the thing. It's not like you don't have to look high and low for examples, and then you find one. Every single time the Prophet does something, there is something that is deeply connected to this, either preparing himself to be a person that can impact change, or he's doing it. In other words, even his worship, even the most kind of private of worship, is building up his character to have the strength to be able to listen to things that he wouldn't want to listen to. When you're placed with all this responsibility, and you have to get on with it, you have to have a source of strength that is internal to you and nobody can touch and nobody can tap into except yourself. That is also needed for you to fulfill your task as a prophet, which is to convey. The Prophet, Allah said to him, "Balligh ma unzila ilayka min rabbik, fa in lam taf'al fama ballaghta risalata." Convey what was being revealed to you from your Lord, and if you don't do that, you haven't conveyed the message. He's not got a choice. The Prophet doesn't have a choice, and then he has to then train himself. I mean, Allah has fortified him, but he has to go through the process of using the asbab, the means by which he's fortifying himself. And then the moment you see that, then you just see this masterclass, one event after the other, after another, where, there's too many examples coming, but it's just interesting that the Prophet, when he speaks, how he speaks. And this, I think one of the things I was deliberating over last week when I was doing kind of some preparation for this is that the Prophet's way of conveying and changing people actually comes from the fact that he's internalized the Quran and how it changes people, the techniques. Because when I teach the iSyllabus course, when there's a lesson on the Quran and the section on muqatti'at, the cryptic starting points of some of the chapters, and I always go through what's the purpose and so on and so forth. And it's obviously, Allah knows best what the purpose is, but there is this sense of in modern advertising, this is what's called a hook, or they call it clickbait. So the thing is, clickbait is just there, and you just go, "Oh, what's this? I'm interested." And the thing is, that is something that's inbuilt. If you say evolutionary or whatever, it's something that intrigue, that you see something you just you're itching to try it, you're itching to find out more. Now the Quran starts with those cryptic letters, and what happened to the Quraysh? They couldn't help it. They said, "Oh, what's this?" And once and I was actually speaking to my sister, she was in Turkey, and she was saying, she was in the marketplace, and then people would say to her, they would start a conversation. The moment you respond to the conversation, they've sold you whatever they want to sell you.
Yeah.
Because it's clickbait, isn't it? The moment the conversation starts, they know that they're better than you. it doesn't, unless you're Pakistani, you're kind of, you're in a you're in a good role. But essentially, it's a click. It's like a hook. And so the Prophet was always look for a way of engaging somebody in conversation or finding some kind of sense of similarity where he could start off engaging with the person to get to converse with them, then to get them to accept Islam or to accept something good, even if they were companions. Like the Prophet, like even the most mundane stuff, he would walk past and find a carcass. He would use that as a reason to strike up a conversation about something to his own companions who believed in the last day, believed in Allah, believed in the nature of the world and so on. He would say, look at this, dead animal, who's going to purchase it from me? Nobody. And they said, oh, you're not going to. He says, it's like, well, this is what the world is in the eyes of God, has no value. And he walks on. And then everyone's looking, and in their mind, this image is never going to go away. And so the Prophet ﷺ used to look for hooks. This is a strategy. It's like and the thing is, if once you know about it, you start using them. And if you are attuned to what works and you've done it through trial and error, you're probably doing it already. But it's rare that people do it already. Once they know about it, they think, okay, there's an opportunity to do that in their family situation, their work situation. If you're a student of knowledge or a scholar, you see, okay, say the right thing at the right time kind of thing as well. Like there's a time and place for everything. And so, persuasion is a kind of whole science. It's been studied, but looking at it from the perspective of the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ and his specific, aspects of his life is interesting, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at, the Prophet ﷺ from the perspective of his character and how that pulled people in, his kind of emotional force that he had, the use of rational faculty the Prophet used to do. But also one thing that fascinates me is the Prophet's use of language as well.
Okay.
How you say something is more important than what you say. Yes. And people don't pick up on that. I don't know why people don't pick up on that. You want to say something to somebody, there's a way of saying it. There's a time, the place, they say, but there's a way as well to impact, to change. I've seen situations where I said, look, you should have just said this and everything would have been sorted. You both wanted the same thing. You should have just said this. Yes. And you didn't. And it's just like your next 20 years of your life is going to be unbearable now. And that's the truth. Just know how to speak. No, you don't have to do a degree in English. You just need to know how to speak and how to make something useful and relevant. And again, this goes back, if you want to see it, I guarantee most people, because you've been through mass media and so on, you're actually masters of it already. Warren, who's that famous Warren Buffett. He's a master of this, actually. I was thinking of this when it was, because he's got this gift of not making money. He's got this gift of explaining things with imagery that never leaves you. Because he was explaining, I think it was a couple of years ago, he was explaining the problem with the American economy. And he said it's all down to the medical healthcare system. He said it's a tapeworm in the American economy. And that's all he said. And essentially what happened is became headline, because tapeworm, do you know what tapeworm, it drills into your body and it just starts to grow and grow and it kills the body. Now, he could have said, the problem with the American economy is that's an overinflated health sector.
Yeah.
No one's going to give a damn. Like the American economy is going to $37 trillion of debt, of public debt. It's not private debt, it's public debt. It doesn't mean anything. Unless you say, okay, if you stack up that in $10 bills, where's it going to reach to? You'll kind of get some kind of idea. But the thing is, now you know that. He's basically told you the problems of the American economy are in one place. The health sector is affecting the American economy in such a way that it's like a tapeworm in the economy. It's going to kill it. And so that that use of tapeworm actually is difficult to get your head. It just affects you. he even said, he talked about, somebody asked him, what kind of thing should I invest in? He said, any company surrounded by a moat. So a moat is obviously, you have a castle, you have this kind of, a moat is basically a water channel around the castle that stops anybody else getting in. So what's he saying? He's basically saying a company with no competition, a moat. Like, it's so primitive. It's such a primitive way of creating money that if you want to know who to invest in, a company that has no competition, no company can copy it, no company can, essentially take its market, and then you're printing money basically. So thing is, you're thinking, well, how is he so rich? It's to do with the fact that he just invests in a normal way, but he has a way of picking up things very simply and expressing them in a very simple way. And the Prophet ﷺ surpassed that. I mean, there's nothing that's like that's the Prophet ﷺ. If you look at famous hadith, I talk about in the course, I talk about strap lines. Strap lines are essentially the prophetic strap lines, which are just statements Prophet made that become almost like common wisdom. Like amongst the Arabs, if you've traveled in the Arab world, there's phrases the Arabs use that they don't even know they're prophetic hadith. There's like a joke. When I was in Damascus, there was a minibus, and somebody said something, and then after they'd said it, the taxi driver said, Sadaqallahu al-Azim. And then the other guy said, shut up, stupid. It's a hadith. And it wasn't, it was actually a verse of Mutanabbi, the poet. And it was funny in the Turkish election. It was this was so funny when I actually heard the speech. The opposition leader, he was obviously trying to cater to Islamic voters. He wants to defeat Erdogan, so he's trying to appeal to everybody. And he was talking, he said, as our great teacher Erbakan used to say. Erbakan's obviously the old Islamic teacher. جاء الحق وزهق الباطل. And I thought, oh my goodness, no. Like, you thinking, shoot yourself in the foot. Like, you do not know how to speak. The whole thing of character and your personality and your stature has been destroyed because, first of all, it's obvious you hated this person. You almost put him to prison in the 1990s. Okay. And now you're saying, like our Hujjah, our great teacher, said, you don't like him, you hate him. You're just doing it for political gain. And the worst thing is, you quote a verse of Quran saying it's not a verse of Quran, it's actually our great teacher. He says, it's like dig a grave for yourself. So that is the art of making sure you do not persuade, because that became viral. And so the thing is, if you're not going to persuade, at least remain silent. This is the thing. It's just so important. You cannot realize, you cannot fully comprehend the effect of not being able to convince people and persuade people, and to actually just know when to stop speaking and know when to speak. This kind of very simple, kind of things that are common sense, but there is a kind of process to this. I think there's definitely a roadmap. And in the course, what I'm going to do is, inshallah, create a kind of roadmap of mapping out the Prophet's personality, his stature, the way that he created this demeanor of authority as well, and then just mapping out all the different things I think that are kind of key, because I can't do them all, so I'm going to kind of cull them down to probably the kind of top 40 I think that are important. And then as soon as you have them in a couple of words, you'll have it there. Strap lining, that's one of the ones I came up with. Strap lining, what's that? It's saying a phrase which is true. And I'll tell you another one. Like, I was watching this this thing, Disney, what's it called, Star Wars, kind of, what's it called, it's kind of a fallout, not fallout from, what's it called, it's spin-off. It's called what's it called, Mandalorian. Okay, you're nice and good, because I'm just catching up with like 3 decades of not watching anything. So there's this thing, it's actually an interesting story. It's kind of a religious order which is part of the universe, and they have a code, and every time they have to do something, they say, this is the way. So in other words, when anything morally difficult comes up that they don't know what to do and they have to find out a solution to it, they always go for the truth and what is correct.
Interesting.
And there's no discussion about it. Everybody says, this is the way.
The way.
Do you understand? Like, in other words, like there's a moral predicament, and one way of dealing with it will be that, you know, we're victorious, but we'll have to jettison our values. The other way is that we'll be defeated, but we'll remain true to our values. What do? Remain true to our values, and everyone says, this is the way. That's the creed. So they have a creed as well. And so straplining is essentially, you have a phrase which then people use out of that context. Like, now I use that with Sinan if we're kind of talking about something or need to do something, and we're in the same situation where we don't know. I'm trying to test if he knows what's the right thing to do or not. And we both look at each other and say, this is the way. Like, should you give money to the mosque after Jum'ah? I give him some money, and this is the way. So the thing is, that's like,
very clever.
But the point is, there's ways of weaving that into your life and using it to get round to doing something that you know you should do, or influencing somebody in a specific way. That I think you have to actively try it. It's like learning to ride a bicycle. No one is born knowing how to do that.
Yeah.
You learn it. You learn it very quickly. In fact, most people do. But still, you have to learn it. And the moment that you pick up on the fact that these are kind of what they call in popular culture, they call them memes, like ideas and methods of doing things. They're very, very powerful.
Yeah. And
so one of the things I'll be looking at also is like the whole meme culture, and how it's used and how it's abused and how has utility in an Islamic context, and how it ties in certain ways with the prophetic seerah as well, because, you know, there's a kind of evolution of these things. So yeah, lots of ideas, lots of things that I've just kind of have noted in the back of my mind for the last 20, 25, 30 years that, you know, they're just coming out now, and I'm kind of putting them together, inshallah, for this course.
So as someone who's going to do the course, what I've understood is that we're going to, I suppose, after the course, we'll be able to engage with the seerah in a deeper way, but pick up on actually a lot of the stuff that you mentioned, Sheikh, about communication, the persuasion of the Prophet ﷺ, that almost that hand movement where if you don't see it, you just don't see it. And we're hoping through this course, we will get actually, to see,
you know, that thing, that hand, I just came to when I was speaking to you.
Yeah.
I was thinking, how can I explain this to you? And then I don't know why magician came to my mind, but it is that, like, when because I was the last couple of days, I've been looking at all these examples. Are they examples? Are they not? Then I read it, and I read the Arabic for it, and I say, wow. And I go back and I check the Arabic in different narrations. I say, wow, that's been mistranslated. So I was looking at the hadith of the Jariyah, the young woman who came to the Prophet ﷺ, and she said, I have, you know, indali haja, I have a need, and can you come? And the Prophet said, you know, come to this this part of the road, and I'll fulfill whatever need you have. Now, within the hadith is a very deep intent of the Prophet listening to her, but in the translations they all say he gave her what she wanted. But in the hadith, what comes out very clearly to me is that he sat there, he didn't do anything, because he sat there, and the mistranslation of it is that he walked about with her to different people. In this specific version, it's that he sits and he fulfills her need. And how is that? He listens to her because she has things on her mind. It says fi ra'siha shay'un. You know, she has something. She had a complicated mental state. Let's just say that. And so the Prophet sat with her, humility, and then he just listened to her until she was happy. And the thing is that I was thinking of that. Like, I kept reading it and looked at different narrations, and I thought, wow, That's amazing, because every time people mention it, it's just like a kind of a strange hadith that people say, oh, well, this might have happened, that might have happened. But there's something, the Prophet was there to convey something to her and to make her grow in some way, and that was through listening. And so that's it. That's thing of, so one thing is to go back to what you were saying about the courses. One of the aspects is just to read the prophetic life in a different way. Yeah. That's a kind of unintentional, I would say, fallout from the course.
Okay.
Because it became something that happened when I was just looking at content for this. I end up having to go back and look at a hadith and say, wow, okay, this is replay that in slow motion. Oh, right, okay. And you'll know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
You never pick up unless somebody points it out to you. And so that's one aspect. And the other aspect is kind of, hopefully, is creating the kind of blueprint that you can kind of go back to and say, okay, I'll use this here and I'll use that there. And I'll build on my own strengths and weaknesses, because some people have an inability to speak, or they think they have an, because when I have an inability to speak, even though I speak all the time. Initially, I remember when I graduated, I think there's about 3 or 4 students from Europe who were in Damascus at the same time, and they said, oh, we want you to invite you because you graduated to a meal. And I said, okay. And we got to the meal and had the meal, and then they looked at me and said, okay, you're going to give a speech. And I thought, like, what are you talking about? Like in broad Glaswegian, like, you on about, mate? Like, I just gone with it. I kind of said something like, right, guys, like, you're going to go home and you're going to spread it. That's going to do that. And then something unintelligible, I kind of just mumbled on it for a couple of minutes. And the thing is, it's through practice and, in a sense, confidence, but also observation of other people, how they speak, and kind of, just getting a grip of what you're trying to say and what's the purpose of something. That means that I believe everybody can benefit themselves in that way. There's nobody that I believe is unable to speak publicly. There's nobody I believe that is incapable of convincing somebody else of their point of view, if only they make a serious attempt at doing it. There's nobody in that situation at all. And so if that's the case, it means that something like this, which is a course on prophetic persuasion, ticks a lot of boxes because it brings you close to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Just humble. It humbles you just at the aspects of his life that were the package that ended up convincing people. And Robert Carlyle, his Heroes and Hero Worship. If you read that, I was reading that this morning. If you read that and you read it again and you think about what he's saying, he's essentially saying that there was nobody who came to humanity who was able to persuade people like this person was. Because he talked about akhlaq, he talked about his speech, he talked about his conduct, he talked about his humility, he talked about these things that are essentially part of what Aristotle talks about when he talks about the perfect triangle of persuasion, which is, having a character which is pristine, having this sense of creating this sense of empathy and emotion, and then having this call which is rational and logical. The Prophet had all 3 of them in perfect balance. And that's why Carlyle ended up going against the grain in the 19th century and saying this man he's a hero. He is beyond, he's somebody that we need to all, like Nietzsche said, this is a religion that we have to, bow ourselves and lay down flat for, because it's more superior than anything that we have. And that comes from this, deep persuasive quality that the Prophet had. But then, remember, the thing is, if the Prophet had it, then his inheritors have it as well. Like if he has it, the ulama, they have to reclaim it as well. And that's kind of the kind of thing that I always look when I look at the religious discourse in the West, how scholars are engaging with issues. I see that there's a distancing for a majority of people, scholars, a distancing from that. But for some, I see most of them are hidden scholars. They're kind of hidden scholars that are not, don't have the Facebook accounts and all the rest of it. They're embodying it and they're having impact. Like they'll be, burning the midnight oil, authoring, teaching, and then their students are the ones that kind of just create this amazing explosion of activity. But they themselves embody it because there's some kind of authenticity there. And so, there's a time and a place for everything. And the time and place now, I think, for Muslim thing, kind of discourse and scholarship and activity, I think it's a very testing time. And one of the aspects in the course I'm going to talk about is Muslim discourse, modern Muslim discourse, and why it's become essentially demagoguery. It's basically shouting matches, and it's basically what we'd call punching up, or a race for likes. While sacrificing every aspect of kind of moral superiority that we have as a community. Doesn't matter what you say, whether it's moral or not, as long as you get the likes or you get the clicks or whatever, that's what counts. And scholarship and everything can be thrown out the window. That is, I think, is a grave mistake. It's not even a mistake, actually. It's a grave danger now to Islam, where that's all that people think about. It's just about, going through a social feed and going through and consuming stuff and then finding what's entertaining amongst Muslim scholars and arguments and all the rest of it. And that's all that happens. And in that, the prophetic character, the prophetic art of change is essentially lost.
So one of the other things I've definitely picked up, that of course, the art of communication, rhetoric, persuasion, how we will better ourselves as husbands, fathers, sons, brothers. But it seems to me that the course is deeply spiritual, because you're engaging with the Prophet ﷺ in a way that perhaps we've never traditionally or through Seerah books kind of engaged. And then you're showing that to what we have come now to, and with the kind of social media and the gap actually in between. I've got so many questions to ask you, Sheikh, not from people, just actually myself. So I'm gonna ask one from myself.
That aspect of the spiritual thing is really important.
Yeah, okay.
But I think there's a famous book by, I think it was Marshall McLuhan. He's a famous author. He authored mostly in the 70s. He came up with the phrase global village, but he also came up with this amazing book, 1967. What is it? What's the book called? The medium is the message. Have you heard of this book?
No.
Basically, came with this idea that what's the message? The message, usually we say, is the message is the message. Like, whatever you're saying is what the message is. He's not saying that. He's saying the medium is the message. In other words, the way that you deliver is the message. In other words, if you consume your information through an iPhone or through a social media feed, that's what it is. If you consume it through a scholar saying it to you and you're repeating it, like Quran, for example, that is as much the message as what you're, why do people go to Mauritania? Remember, people used to go to Mauritania and sit with these, slates. I was saying, what are you doing? And I was like, medium is the message. We need to sit with the sheikh in the sand. We need to eat, food with sand in it. And because it's true, the medium is the message.
The medium is
and so the message, the Prophet, for me, the Prophet was the message. At one level, Abdullah ibn Rawaha actually mentions this. Even if the Quran had not been revealed, the sight of him would have given you the message.
No.
So McLuhan was onto something, and he was quite interested. It's an interest. I'm going to be talking about his ideas in the course, but he was onto something, because for us as Muslim, the Prophet, when he first was asked to convey the message publicly, he stood on the top of Abu Qais, this mount in Mecca, and he said, "Who am I?"
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yes. Yeah.
Everyone knows it, but what's he saying? He's basically saying what McLuhan says 1400 more years later, the medium is the message. If you know who I am, then whatever I'm going to give you, just accept it, because game's over. And that's it. And that's why, so one of the aspects, sorry, I cut you off. One of the aspects is this connection. And just, I think for a Muslim, the modern heresy of Islam is the de-sanctification of the Prophet ﷺ, in terms of making him into a flesh and bones human being, and that's it. And to just configure that into what we all as Muslims should be believing in the Prophet as being this source of light, guidance, and divine protected guidance that we understand him to be, is very important to reintroduce into Muslim discourse.
And it's amazing, Sheikh, how you're doing that, in the sense you're taking these strap lines, medium as a message, or Aristotle's kind of whole understanding of ethics, but you're able to link all that back to the Prophet ﷺ.
I'm trying to be able, because the whole point, I'm a bit stressed now. Got a couple of days left. So the idea was I'm going to pull this off. So inshallah. Yeah.
Subhanallah. And from the trailer, that, I mean, from what we've understood now, it's very interesting how you're able to, or you're trying to, like you said, to do that. Couple of questions, Sheikh. The first one is from me. And I mean, if you look at general Islamic history, it's quite interesting how it spreads. But one particular historical period for me sticks out is the Mongol period. And how did Muslim scholars and awliya and so on and so forth persuade these shaman Mongols to actually adopt Islam? I mean, you know, like even with Christianity and Judaism, we have a reference point, right? But with people who are so alien to an extent and have no reference point, you're able to persuade them within a few generations, where, you know, the rest of Europe is doing dua that they become Christians. They essentially come into the doors of Islam.
So what's the,
how do you reflect over that?
Yeah. So what's the most famous story of the conversion of Halago? Was it Halago? What's the most famous kind of story you know about the conversion of a famous commander?
So obviously there's Barke Khan.
So Barke Khan, how did he, if you, off the top of your head, if you don't want, if I turn tables and interviewing.
Okay, the only one particular story that sticks out, and I don't know which Khan it is. It's one of the Sufi scholars going to the court of the Khan, and they kind of say that, show us how you pray, and they pray. And then he smacks his head off the ground and he says, you guys are worse than dogs. And he says, if it wasn't, you're like dogs. It's like, if it wasn't for Islam, we would have been kind of worse than dogs or something. But like the Sheikh maintains this kind of composure. Yes. And that's one of the stories anyway that sticks out for me.
Yeah. So what comes out, this resonates with lots of stories about the Mongols converting or allowing leeway to Muslim scholars and saints, is where they saw that these people had no fear of death. Like the one thing that the Mongols had was this thing of impaling people.
Yes.
Like where they, so you're in a Mongol context if there's somebody impaled at the entrance of a town. And so these scholars are dons, because they say, you might as well impale me right now, because it doesn't make any difference. And so that unhinged the power dynamics, because they're thinking, these people not running away, they're crying, they're saying, like, is that the best you can do? And it kind of unhinges people. And that's again a technique. That's a technique where you're it's like in cricket you have this googly, the kind of, when you bowl a googly, was like, you don't know what's just happened. It's just, wow, that I'm out. It's outside your frame of reference. And so scholars have to think on their feet, like into this age. They have to think on their feet and say, what is that way of approaching society where they will say, wow, that's way out there. I'm intrigued. I'm interested. And for me, I think part of it is now going against the cultural kind of wave that is hitting all societies. Muslims are the ones that are just standing there thinking, I'm not accepting that. They're the only consistent social group that is saying, no, we're not playing that game. Consistently saying it. Nobody as a community is saying that apart from Muslims. And I think that's where we have hit the nail on the head in terms of, we're on a discourse, a religious, ethical, popular discourse, which is actually onto a winner here. And that's something that, again, that comes back to innately, we've just been trained in that way through our forefathers. our scholars, our teachers have kind of inbuilt that within us. And I think that's definitely something that I think, going back to that Mongol context, it is bringing into the equation something that nobody ever thought about. It's not about proving the logical clarity of Islamic faith tradition. What they'll do is they'll take your brain and have it as a soup. If you think you're going to use logic against me, okay, take your head and we're going to make soup out of it and eat it. There's no answer. And it's not even your ethics, because, they don't really care about ethics.
They don't care, yeah.
Yeah. So what it is it's the thing, which is the fear of death that they, and the shamans and the imploring of dead spirits, going into that realm and saying, well, death is nothing. It's just a passageway into somewhere else, just unhinges them to the point that they say, well, I'm interested in this stuff.
Sheikh, another question, a quick one. When can you think of, in the last couple of decades, that you sat through a khutbah and you thought, wow, this was persuasive? This was one. Can you think of it?
The problem with that is that every imam that saw me in the congregation over the last 20 years is going to be watching this thinking, "Oi, you put me in a difficult situation. Come on."
Okay, there's many, but one that maybe sticks out
there's
for you.
There's so many.
Okay.
Like, there's they're actually coming in as an ocean and lifting reminding me of all these amazing times I've had. Let's see. 20 years. Let me come back to it. There must be some.
Okay.
Inshallah. I'll pray to Allah that something comes to me. Because one of my teachers told me, Sheikh Mahmoud al-Bayruti, taught us, he had a class on khitaba, and he said the key to a dawn level khutbah is that the person who came to your khutbah the next week remembers the one thing you wanted to tell them about in that khutbah. That they come back next week and you ask them, what was the khutbah about? And they tell you.
So, yeah. Which
is actually true. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's a dawn level. And I remember I was in Azhar, I enrolled in Azhar in 1990, was it 4 or 5 or something? I can't remember what it was. And the first week I was there, I went to a khutbah, and the khatib said, he said, and one thing that sticks in my mind is he said that, the definition of taqwa is remembering what chapter of Quran you read in Fajr. So I said, drop mic moment, like boom, like that was next level. Because to this day, I was thinking, yeah, that's true for everybody in the congregation. They looked around thinking, guy's got a point. Because that's it. I mean, khutbah is all about creating change or creating some kind of sense of a lesson that you take on and you kind of never forget it. And that's the key. The key to a great khutbah is the fact that your congregation come back next week, the week after, and then say, this is what you talked about last week. Is this on the point? It's just straight there. So that's my kind of excuse.
This question could be answered during the sessions.
Inshallah, I'm going to think really hard on this.
Can we watch the course again on demand if we're busy?
Yes, the course is live. The course is live in the class ends, but as soon as it's gone live, it's recorded and it's put into the portal. So I think they have, I think 3 months or so. You can watch it, anytime. You can pause it, reverse it, speed it up, whatever. A lot of people, I think half of our students watch it live when it comes out, when I'm teaching. And then once it's gone out, I think a couple of hours later, it's uploaded onto the portal and you're able to watch it. With the slides, I think the slides are provided and so on and so forth. And there's also a Q&A at the end.
Q&A, that's right.
Course,
I like
kind of a recap, and then any discussions that come out of the course that it's worth kind of pondering over live with other students and things. I'm sure we go through that as well.
So inshallah, the course will be starting this Saturday, I believe, 11 till 1:30. My final question, Sheikh, and I think you've covered most of the stuff really of you know, you've sold it to me. You sold it to me.
Okay, persuaded you.
Yes, you you persuaded me. For a normal Muslim person there's so many courses, and he'd be like, why is this course necessary for me?
I mean, it's not necessary. It's not a necessary thing. I mean, what's necessary is your prayers and your zakat and all the rest. The kind of things that we understand to be important. I think this course is. You could do a course in Sirah and look at the life of the Prophet ﷺ. I think this is something that everybody talks about. Life coaches and time management and productive Muslims and X, Y, and Z and this life hack. They talk about life lessons and hacks and all this kind of stuff.
Atomic habit and
yeah. So all these things, and you kind of thinking, well, there is a source to all of this, and there's a source to all of it, which is actually more than just being a successful, kind of manager or kind of, the kind of practical benefits that people want to learn these things for, being kind of being a good parent, whatever it is. There is a kind of a more simpler generalization of this, which is that it's something that's beneficial for everybody. Because as I said before, there's nobody that I know that does not benefit in a real way, like a quality way, from being able to converse, speak, understand, and communicate better, and to understand what they need to put into place to persuade somebody to do something else. Like, there's nobody that is not going to be in that situation. The moment you connect with somebody else, there's a dynamic there, which is, you could get in contact with a couple of friends, you're going to go out, and the conversation is all about persuasion. Where are you going? What are you going to do? Some of the things are halalifiable, some of them are not. Okay, it all hinges on your ability just to not to say astaghfirullah al-azim, we're not going to this bid'ah or this haram place. You could just do it in a nice way.
Yes.
And in that, the person that you've convinced actually likes your company. Like, you're not somebody that spout it, next week we're going to not speak to that person, go and get some other people so we can go to that place. No, you need to get the same output, the same result, but in a way that actually has longevity. So you're given an alternative, and the alternative is such that they actually like your company as well. And that's it. It's about the fact that every single time you're in a conversation, there is some kind of negotiation. Everything, life's a negotiation. Yes. In fact, the course is going to be, there's a whole section about the Prophet's skills in negotiating. And in fact, I was looking at the Harvard negotiation strategy, which is taught at Harvard University. You just copy and paste from the Prophet's life.
Wow!
It was really funny, because I was looking at it, and I was thinking, wow, that university just copied and pasted something as plagiarism. So yeah, so the thing is, people always think this is like for managers and work context. It's not. It's actually like all the examples I have of my kids. Or my wife, I convinced her to persuade her to marry me. Like, she didn't see that coming, by the way. That was like a complete Jedi mind trick, which all was based upon the prophetic sunnah, inshallah. But that's the thing. You can get people to do things without them knowing that they're doing something which is good for them. Not something bad. It's something that's good for them.
Good for them.
And thing is, that's one way. If you want a simple way of understanding it, it's a way of increasing your rewards as well, because if you convince people to do good things, because the whole point of this, persuading them to do good things, the Prophet said, the person that points towards something is like the person that did it. So if you point towards something that's good, you're just creating this investment strategy, which you're just repaying all this reward. You don't even know. You're like, people are always talking about passive income.
Yeah, passive.
You know that. Oh, you get passive income. Like, the Prophet was a dawn of passive income. At a different level. He set up strategies where he just got all these people that accepted Islam and accepted the truth, and then he just straight into the coffers. It's amazing, because then that's one aspect that incites you to also do the same. That you can influence so many people, you can affect so many people, and every good that comes out, you're counseling. If you manage to save a relationship, and it has all those positive impacts on the family and then the extended family, and all those good times, essentially that's all in your bank account. That's like that. If that's not going to entice you to do something, then nothing is. Because if you're not, projecting goodness, and you're not preserving goodness and promoting goodness, then there's not much point in doing anything else. And so the thing is, I think the key of the course is what we didn't touch upon it a lot, which is what are you persuading people to do? It's not persuading them to buy your secondhand car. We're talking about taking the right choice, like in their life, like in terms of their faith, in terms of their actions, in terms of their conduct. Now that you're persuading them towards something that's good. And so, who wouldn't want to be in that situation where you're actually being the means by which that happens?
And from that, I've just picked up just now, it's this idea, essentially, you're an effective da'i. For those who are passionate about da'wah and stuff, this is what, isn't it? How to kind of, subhanallah.
Yeah, so it's prior to this whole idea of da'wah. Because the Prophet never was a da'i in that way.
Yeah.
Because he did it and you didn't notice. Like we didn't, when we look back, he says, oh my goodness, he was a da'i. Yad'u. But you go to the verb and you make the verbal noun and you say, well, he's a da'i. It's in fa'il, whatever. That's his looking back. But he did it without us noticing. And that's like a miracle as well, that he did it and people said, oh, what happened there? I'm a Muslim. Ooh. Like Hamza is a perfect example. He did it. He created a situation where, the Prophet is attacked. Abu Jahl is then confronted by Hamza. Hamza is engaged in a conversation, smacks him, and then he said, I'm a Muslim. And then he kind of looks around and goes, oh, what happened there? He never intended that to happen. He struck him and said, do you insult my nephew and when I'm in his religion? Like came out of his mind. He didn't know until the Prophet. Thing is, the reason why that happened is the Prophet had such a connection with Hamza that he got his uncle to love him, but could not tell him, look, Hamza, you need to accept Islam because of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
You understand?
Absolutely.
When it came to emotion, it just came out. And so the Prophet persuaded, this is why people mistake this, because the people say, well, Hamza radiallahu anh became Muslim because that instant. No, the Prophet made him Muslim.
Yes.
But God created the excuse of Abu Jahl essentially attacking the Prophet ﷺ, and then that being the means by which Hamza had to put his cards on the table. It is absolutely fascinating that, this is how the Prophet works, that he's calling, in mysterious ways, as we say. But they're not mysterious because it was just that he was unbelievable. Like the Prophet could not be questioned in his moral character and his sincerity. And Hamza knew that. And when push came to shove, he had to put his cards on the table. And so that's learned. You can learn that because that's all to do with the character of the Prophet ﷺ. That his own uncle knew he was right. And if your family know you're right, you're onto a winner, because, you can't hide things from your family. You can hide stuff from society, but you can't hide things from people that see you day in, day out. And that's like essentially, if I want to say where's the beginning of the course, it's that. Like, sort your character out. How do you do that?
Yes.
Character of the Prophet ﷺ. So one of the things I'll be doing is looking at the character of the Prophet ﷺ. Why was it that when he stood and spoke, people said, okay, whatever he's saying is not out of personal interest? And that's powerful if you just say that. It's not because he has anything to gain from this. Not at all. He's doing it for you.
And that point is so important, because I suppose that's what differentiates Rasulullah from everything else, to the companies now, to the conglomerates, to the kind of mad consumer market because they're selling something to you. Essentially, they don't care about you. They're just,
I was listening to radio today. I was listening to BBC Radio today. It was a big BBC radio station, and there was an advertisement by British Gas. And I was thinking, why are they advertising? And I was so interested. They had obviously somebody from an Afro-Caribbean background trying to feel like they are part of the people, part of the kind of, and saying, oh, we're employing one, kind of apprentice every week for the next 10 years. And we went together. After like having record sales profit on the back of extortionate prices and so on. And now, what is it now? Oh, you're in it for the common good, and they're all in it together. No, this is so fake. It's obvious why you've got this person paid to do this advert. It's to make you feel as if you're one of the people. You're not. And so that character thing, when I listened to that, I thought, how are people going to not pick up on that? But they do, because people are just being brainwashed into, oh, somebody who sounds like me saying something that I like, and it's got a wee song at the background. British Gas. That's it. Mashallah, go for it. Just like, and the thing that opens your eye is that thing, that there's a reason why they're saying that. And there's a reason why they're trying to persuade you to think that British Gas is in it for the public good. It's not. It's a private company. And so once you know this, you kind of look at everything. Oh my goodness, is that why they're doing it? Oh, is that why they're doing it? And then everything becomes a bit more clear.
But and that's powerful what you said again, Sheikh, about the Prophet ﷺ. It's not about him. It's all about you, and he's worried. So, and again, a quick hadith I was reading, and of course you've come across it, is about Sayyidina Jaber's camel. I think is very weak, so the Prophet taps it, and it becomes kind of energetic, and then the Prophet says, "Listen, sell it to me for a couple of coins." And
amazing.
But then the Prophet gives him money, and then gives him the camel, gives him the animal back.
And gets him married off. Starts to discuss, are you married?
Yeah, the marriage.
Kids? Yeah, it's like
it's one line. Yeah, there you go.
No, like he doesn't even notice it. He's like giving him so much, and he doesn't click on the fact that he's just giving him like tons of stuff, and he thinks he's like having a bargain here, like he's in a bargain with the Prophet, selling him stuff and all the rest of it.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like one-sided, mate. It's like, radiyallahu anhu, but it's one-sided. The problem is this is filling your pockets.
SubhanAllah.
Yeah, it's like you're thinking, that's the thing. Every hadith you start to listen to and read, you're thinking, wow, what's happened? Just rewind that. Oh, good, look at this. How do you do that? How can I do that? This is the thing. Like, how can you? I remember I was in a mosque in Glasgow, and there was somebody who came up to me, young guy. And he said, "Oh, can I have £10?" I put my hand in my pocket, give him £10. He looked at me, walked away. To this day, he comes up to me and says, "Why do you do that?" So funny. So it's like, what's the big deal? Like, that's it done. Like, this 30 years later, he does that. Because I was like skint at that time. I was like a university student. Like I was just, I think, first year, second year university. I think he needed something for something. And that's the thing. That small thing makes a big impact. And so you never know, and that's in the life of the Prophet, and that is the thing that he does, like, because he's in that mindset all the time, or the not mindset, he's in the spirit set, I would say, like spiritually he's there. He just has to do it. It's like khaliqatan. It's like this is how he is habitually. He cannot be a person who thinks about cost-benefit analysis or utilitarian outcomes, or no, nothing at all. It's just pure. It's like an open book. Subhanallah. It's like, it is an amazing thing to think about.
And I would encourage, therefore, anyone who's in counseling, who cares about mental health work. I think this course is right there, because this is how you're going to connect with Rasulullah and understand these communication methods of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We are way over time, Sheikh, and I can still carry on by. Yeah, we should.
No, I've been told, like half an hour ago, I was told cut it off. So
Each time I feel like bringing a hadith to you and then for you to
No, because
try
you
and dissect it.
I end up fainting.
Yes, I am. Okay.
It's the Imam Bayalda, the Imam fainted.
Alhamdulillah. So, no, Jazakallah for your time, Sheikh.
Not
and,
at all. Thank you for your hosting.
Jazakallah for just choosing a very pertinent topic. I think this has really touched something for many of us anyway. And I didn't even ask you about your light bulb moment. I knew I missed something.
A light bulb moment. Oh my goodness. Yeah, is that thing I mentioned at the beginning. When I started to get interested in the fact that there's a life outside like street fighting and disrupting school and all the rest of it. It happens from a teacher, a communicator wanting to persuade you to sort your life out. That is, to this day, I remember a lot of friends from school who'd done the iSyllabus course. It's probably about 7 people in my class in school have done the iSyllabus course, which is very embarrassing. So, because they know what I was up to in school. So the thing is, the light bulb is there. What is it that makes a teacher want to persuade you to do something different? It can't just be the interest in chemistry or geography or English. There has to be this sense that there's a wider concern for the well-being of a person. And so they're drops in oceans. Like the teachers I'm talking about are drops in oceans of the Prophet ﷺ. And so then when you think of the Prophet ﷺ, you're thinking, oh, whoa, he doesn't even know me. And we're his brothers. Like this is like too much. And so then it becomes like quite important, light bulb. I need to know what was the technique system that he had and what were the patterns that he did. In fact, he didn't have techniques. We didn't know what the techniques were. It was a life pattern. It was just an habitual life pattern that we're mapping out now. It's like mapping out the unknown. And say, okay, there's one. And Shaykh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda, rahimahullah, he did that in terms of his teaching. The Prophet used this and this and this and this. I'm just expanding it slightly to the whole ambit of persuasion, which is all about some beyond just passing on information. It's about changing people's perceptions, inshallah.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. So again, to everyone who's watching, inshallah, the course starts this Saturday and you can enroll onto it. There's also recorded sessions that you can catch up even if you miss the live sessions. And then at the end, there'll be a very lively question and answers with Sheikh Ridwan. And I could imagine there'll be so much coming up for you personally. So Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. Inshallah, Allah give you tawfiq and success in the course. And it's amazing you managed to cover the tradition and even the Harvard's strategy and policies, and even look at the Turkish elections. And we were talking about Mahdi Hassan's book, which he's tried to do the whole persuasion thing. So there's
win any argument.
Yeah.
Let's do another half an hour. Because he's got this amazing thing, actually. Mahdi Hassan's got this amazing thing where he talks about not the straw man, the steel man.
Okay.
Which I use all the time. In fact, you know who used it? Just keep you thinking here. Imam Fakhruddin Razi, he was accused of always presenting the Mu'tazilite case stronger than the Mu'tazilites. And then not answering it.
Yes. Yeah.
You know this famous thing that he would say the Mu'tazilites say this, and he would provide this picture of the Mu'tazilite point where everyone would read it and say, yeah, I agree with that. And he'd just walk away. And so this Mahdi Hassan comes up with this idea of the steel man. I said steel man. The steel man, meaning what's the best form of the opponent's argument?
Right.
There's no point. There's no going for the weakest, going for the strongest. If you can't attack the strongest, if you can defeat the strongest, then you've won. And so this
so interesting. You linked it with Razi. I didn't make that.
Yeah, it's when I read that.
That's so interesting.
I read through his books, part of his book, and the first thing that came to my mind was all of my teachers were saying, why do you not answer the Mu'tazilites? The reason was he wanted you to realize that this is actually what they believe, and if you can't refute it, you might as well become a Mu'tazilite. Very clever man.
Wow, very clever.
He did and walked away. He's basically like a Don. When a Don does something, they walk away. They say, okay, you sort it out because I don't have time to sort it. I can sort it, but I don't want to. You do it. And if you can't do it, you might as well give up. And so he has this thing of the steel man concept, which is actually a very interesting thing. because you always look, in terms of persuading people, you always look for the strongest version of what they have. If it's kufr, like if you have somebody who hates Islam, you look for the most competent, coherent aspect of what they've said. You engage with that, not the weakest.
Okay.
And that's why I find when I follow Muslim apologists and people in da'wah, I always find they don't do that, because they basically mess it up. They use the weakest position, and they kind of show they've got muscles and all the rest of it. It's not worth it. It's not worth it intellectually. It's not part of the tradition. It's not true to our tradition, where you just kick somebody when they're on the ground. You kind of look for the best option.
So
anyway, don't want to go into another half an hour. But I will be covering Mahdi Hassan's stuff.
I mean, I think that's, because I watched some of the talks, and I think that's quite pertinent. Okay, shall we call it a day, Sheikh?
Inshallah, okay. Call it a night, inshallah.
Inshallah. Oh yeah, call it a night. Jazakallah khair. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and give you tawfiq and afiyah, and allow us to reconnect to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in very deep and meaningful ways, like you've mentioned, inshallah.